All right, welcome everybody to a midnight. Well, it's not midnight; it's 8 o'clock at night instead of 8 o'clock in the morning. Episode of Seaside One. Today we're going to be talking about a topic called framing, which is a really important thing to understand if you're going to be studying and analyzing social issues in computer science. It really is sort of one of those fundamental concepts that you have to get if you're going to make sense of the world. If you make sense of how media works and how politics work and things like that. It's one of the key concepts to becoming a critical thinker. So let's get the show on the road. So here's farming. Sorry, not framing. Farming. A frame is a mental structure that shapes the way you view the world. So, for example, if you've decided that Elon Musk is a tortured genius, then every time he tweets something, then you're going to view that through the lens of him being a tortured genius. If you see him as being somebody who pretends to know things he doesn't, then you will view all of his tweets through that lens. And I don't know. Let's see what he's been tweeting these days. I guess it's kind of funny. Sorry, my neighbor. I've been a good chatbot. I've been a good being. What the heck is this? Okay, so if you see Elon Musk tweeting this, right? You've got Doge, you got him as I don't know, Aquaman or something. Then your view on this will be either look at this guy, he's a troll, he's a moron, he doesn't know what he's talking about. If you think of him as a very funny person, then you would probably laugh at the humor of this. The way that maybe we'll cut this out of the stream. Yeah, so okay, so here is so what's been going on recently with Elon is that his tweets weren't reaching enough people, and so he had engineers at Twitter change the algorithm because there was apparently some technical issue that you can read about where his tweets weren't reaching enough people, and so he literally had Twitter rewrite its algorithm so that more people could see what he was saying. And so if you view Elon as a narcissist, then of course this is the action of a narcissist, right? Whereas if your frame is that of a sort of a tinkering genius kind of person, then he's somebody who's upset about the algorithm not working correctly and wants to fix problems and things like that. And so there's sort of almost an infinite number of ways. We call these things almost like point of views, right? Where you've got a different point of view on the same person, and whatever short little pithy phrase used to describe Elon will probably affect the way that you react to all of his tweets and the way that you view his tweets and everything he says. It's like looking through the world through a periscope, right? On a submarine, right? You've got a periscope and you can look out and you can see the world through the periscope. You can kind of turn it around and look at different things, but everything you see comes through that periscope. So once you kind of understand that every person has a frame, somebody towards your views towards people, if you're into politics, your views towards people in the opposing political party tend to be very negative, right? If you look at the question of would you allow your son or daughter, if asked, to marry somebody in the opposing political party, the number of people saying yes has plummeted in recent years. It used to be yeah, sure, whatever, marry a Democrat, marry a Republican, I don't care. Nowadays it's whoa, these people are destroying the world, and that's a frame. The frame is these Republicans are trying to repeal, basic human rights, and Republicans, oftentimes their frame of Democrats is look at these people trying to destroy American society. They're trying to get rid of families and all this kind of stuff. And each of these things is a frame. So a frame is a mental structure that shapes the way we look at the world. They're everywhere. Okay. And this is not just in social issues in computer science, it also affects programming as well. Okay. How so? Well, if you have a mental frame when you're writing a program, you're not going to think about certain things. So, for example, if you're writing a code for a submarine, let's say, you're going to assume the submarine is always at sea level or below. You know what I mean? Just, that's just, back of the mind, you're going to have a depth value, and it's probably not ever going to be above, sea level. But then maybe someday somebody sends a submarine up a river or something, and then your code crashes, and then it literally crashes. Like the submarine runs into rocks because the computer system shut down. And if you think that's like a silly haha hypothetical, wrong. Airplane nav systems were written in such a way that they just assumed the people writing it was never like specified anywhere. They just kind of assumed that airplanes couldn't be like below sea level, right? Like maybe a little bit below sea level, but not a lot. And so when planes landed in the Dead Sea, their nav system stopped working because the nav system, like the people had a frame. They said, they're airplanes, they're in the sky, right? Planes should be on the sky or landed on the ground, and they just didn't consider the fact that planes could land in the Dead Sea, which is quite a bit below sea level. And the nav systems didn't work, and they were in a bit of a pickle. Like they couldn't take off. They could land, but they couldn't take off again. If you assume that airspeed is always going to be positive, and then you get a huge gust of wind, that can cause a reboot on a nav, system on a computer and kill the people on board. Like these frames, these ways we view the world are everywhere in programming as well, and those are the things that kill people. It's usually the things we don't think about because that's the frame we had. The frame is that helicopters are always going to be in the sky. They're not going to be below sea level. Or airplanes go forwards. There's no reverse on an airplane, and you don't ever like write that down. You don't ever discuss that at a company. You don't ever say, hey, can airplanes go backwards in the sky? Like no, like we don't talk about that. It's just an implicit thing that just sort of controls our view. And when we write code, we might do something like store airspeed in an unsigned integer. An unsigned integer can't be negative. If you try making a negative value in there, it wraps around to 4 billion. And then, oh Lord, who knows what will happen then, right? So a lot of the safety engineering kinds of things is trying to examine the assumptions you're making and challenge them and say, hey, could this go wrong? Is it possible for there to be a wind gust high enough that, the wind speed can go negative? Or like if you're on the ground, is it possible for the wind speed to be high enough that the plane will take off on its own? And the answer for that is yes. When I was a kid, in fact, one of the airplanes in the Aerospace Museum in San Diego was there because the winds got high enough, like we had yesterday. The winds got high enough that this plane took off on its own. It was just sitting on the runway, or parked probably off the side of the runway, and the winds blew over the wind foil, and it's like, I'm flying now, and then it just like took off. And people just didn't, like it's like, why would you think that a plane could fly if the engine's not on? Guess what? It can. The thing actually had a very low takeoff point, very low speed takeoff point, and so the speed of wind was enough for the thing to just lift up and just blow over the fence and crash, and it ended up getting donated to the Aerospace Museum. It was an old World War II tri-engine. Let's see. That one. Let's see if they have the takeoff speed in here. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, wait, here we go. All right. Takeoff speed, stall speed, 57 miles an hour. Right. So, yeah, you have high winds, the thing would take right off. And so, and so that'd be an example in real life. Like people would just not tie a plane down, because how could a plane take off on its own, right? And so these things are really important to talk about and really important to think about. You have to, it's basically like asking somebody like, hey, let's examine your assumptions. And that's a hard thing to like get into and to dig into. Like, what are your assumptions you're bringing to the table? That's tough. It's like when you're in a debate, you rarely like mention what your assumptions are, like the family's good, or, Republicans are evil and things like that. Like nobody usually talks about it. So when you're doing argumentation, if you can control the frame, you oftentimes will win the argument. For example, here's two different frames on the matter of abortion. So the left, there's asterisks here because these are very broad, oversimplified. There are obviously people on the left and people on the right that disagree with the broad, viewpoint of their side. But regardless, I'm just going to simplify here. So the view of the left is that the abortion debate is over whether or not a woman has the right to control her own body, right? And so the left describe themselves as being pro-choice on the matter of abortion. Pro-choice is a frame. They're trying to frame the debate in such a way that you're asking, do women have the right to control their own body? Okay, and pretty much 99% of all reasonable people will say, yeah, women have the right to control their own body, right? If you want to eat spaghetti, knock yourself out. Mom's spaghetti, whatever. If you are on the right, though, they frame the debate differently. They say the debate is over the lives of unborn children, right? And so if you ask people, hey, should you kill babies? Most reasonable people would say, no, that's probably wrong. And so this is one of the reasons why the abortion debate never gets resolved, because they're arguing past each other. The left is arguing about if women have the right to control their own bodies, and the right is arguing if you can murder kids. And both sides there's an obvious answer to both of those questions, right? And so when one side debates, they're arguing one thing. When the other side debates, they're arguing the other thing. They're not contradicting each other. They're talking past each other. And so the abortion debate just never ends. And I don't know. I don't see any particular hope that it will end in anytime soon, because they're arguing about different things. So this is from one of my favorite webcomics, SMBC, Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal. And so he talks about a lot of topics in philosophy and stuff like that. He's a very smart dude, and his wife's pretty smart too. So here we go. Uplifting speech. Humanity looked upon Saturn with envy for centuries. No more. We have said to the heavens, we have created our own rings and placed them in orbit. That's one frame. Another frame is currently there is approximately 6,000 tons of man-made space junk orbiting the planet. And so if you want to make it sound depressing, you call it space junk. If you want to make it sound uplifting, you say we've made our own rings around the planet. So again, if you can control the frame, you can win the debate. And this is absolutely essential if you're ever involved in media, public relations, or politics, or anything vaguely related to that. I was actually a communications minor in college, area study, whatever. It's basically a minor. One class, one less upper division, one more lower division, I think. Slightly worse than a minor. Okay. So it's a big deal, right? So the frame that you go with when you're talking about something, right? So with the Black Lives Matter protests, the left framed it as Black Lives Matter, right? The debate is over whether or not Black Lives Matter. And if you say no, you're a horrible person, and fairly so, right? I don't think any reasonable person would say no, they don't. There's no person of good character that says no, we should just kill black people. Nobody says that, right? I'm sure you can find KKK members and things like that do, but if you're just talking about your average American with a good nature and a good spirit that cares about people, Republicans do. They're not advocating for just going out and capping people, But that was the frame, right? Black Lives Matter. And so the counter frame from the Republicans on it wasn't Black Lives Don't Matter, because who would support that? Nobody. I mean, maybe the 5,000 KKK members in America, sure, but nobody with good character and good spirit would support that. And so the right wing response to that was all lives matter, right? Because who could argue against all lives matter, right? And so that one is more of a direct, pushback against each other. And so, are you saying Black Lives Don't Matter when you're saying all lives matter? Is that your response here? When you say all lives matter, are you trying to ignore the problems that black people are having? That's more of a direct conflict than an abortion. But you can see, again, that's an example of how framing works. There's two different frames. And then sometimes you'll see like Blue Lives Matter, and you'll see like the thin blue line and things like that as another alternative frame. So let's just go through some of the issues in politics, and you can just see how the two sides frame things differently. So Obamacare is a frame, actually. The word Obamacare isn't in the law. The law is the Affordable Care Act, the ACA. But Republicans branded it as a frame. We're going to call this Obamacare. This isn't normal health care. It's Obamacare. It's what Obama's giving you. And at first, Obama didn't like it being called Obamacare. Then he eventually apparently embraced it, saying, well, of course I care. It means Obama cares, and I do care. So the last thing I read on the matter is that he thought the term was fine. Like, yeah, it's Obamacare. Cool. And so he kind of flipped the frame on people. So you have single payer healthcare is the way that left describes like their proposed healthcare solutions, where basically the government pays for healthcare, and the right calls it socialism, right? Because the government is basically taking over the health industry, right? The government chooses how much doctors get paid, who lives or dies, theoretically. Death panels is, a right-wing frame. I mean, death panels, you have a bunch of people deciding who dies, right? That's a brilliant frame, quite gruesome, but brilliant nonetheless. And so you can see that, like, it's the same topic, like just having one person paying for medicine instead of two. Currently, it's the patient and their insurance for most people. If you're over, if you're retired, you do have single payer healthcare. You have government, Medicare, and Medicaid if you're poor. So single payer healthcare sounds great. Like, why would you want to have multiple payers? That's complicated. Let's just have single payer. That's nice. Whereas socialist healthcare is like, ooh, socialism, no, bad. Like I'm wearing a red shirt accidentally, but there you go. So this is actually a privacy T-shirt. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a cat that's reading. I think it's 1984. Yeah, it's reading 1984, and it has its tail blocking the surveillance camera. So it's not red for like Che Guevara or something like that. Okay, so as far as immigration, you have innocent refugees that are coming to America for help. Who could turn them away, right? They're just innocent refugees. The right brands them as potential terrorists and drug smugglers, and what did Trump say? Like they're not sending their best or whatever. Donald Trump Jr. described immigrants as being like M&Ms, where 1 out of 100 is poisonous or something like that, and that was a frame. That's a frame. Like if you use a mental metaphor of like a jar of M&Ms and 1 out of 100 is poisonous, would you eat it? Like that's a frame. That's a way of looking at the immigration system, the immigration issue, using a simplified metaphor, basically, which is a frame. Okay. Likewise, the left says undocumented workers. The right says illegal aliens. And doesn't that sound scary? Like an alien, it's like ET. It's like they're predator. The chest bursters and things like that. Whereas with the left, it's just like, oh, it's just somebody who forgot their documentation. Like, oh, where did I put my thing? I just left it at home. And so I'm not supporting either of these frames, by the way, or any of these frames. I'm being slightly sarcastic because I'm making a point that if a frame is well made, nobody can argue about it, right? Like if people accept your frame, if, for example, on the matter of free speech, right? Like there have been cases during Donald Trump's presidency where they were just going up and like punching people, right? Berkeley had a big problem with this. If you wore a red hat, even if it didn't say "Making America Great Again," people would go up and punch you, right? And so the left said those people are giving cover to Nazis. Like all these people talking about free speech, they're actually, secretly Nazis, or they're providing a safe space for Nazis, and so it's our job to go up and punch them. And like, who can argue with that? Like, who likes Nazis? Like, not many people. Like Nazis are bad. Like pretty much everyone agrees that. And so if you accept the frame, then you're like, okay, yeah, maybe these people should not be giving cover to Nazis. Whereas on the right, it's an issue of free speech. Do people have the right to, in public, protest and speak their mind and stuff like that? And this ties in with what we were talking about last time with cancel culture, right? Matters of free speech. And there's a lot of subsidiary issues with free speech, corporate censorship is one, right? Does Twitter have, Twitter definitely has the legal right to censor people on Twitter. Does it have the moral right to censor viewpoints it doesn't like? And the Twitter files shows that they were in fact doing that. Different public speakers and things like that whose views they didn't like, they were turning down their visibility so that people would not see their tweets. And that's an interesting free speech question, because they're a corporation. They have the right on their platform to do that, but is it moral for them to do that? And so, like, somebody on the left say, like, yeah, let's de-voice people that we don't like, and on the right, it's like you're just discriminating against Republicans. And so, like, on Facebook, like, Facebook actually actively didn't moderate a lot of Republican representatives and things like that, because they were exactly afraid of the right, which has been very outspoken against big tech. They were afraid of, like, the House of Representatives, like, getting mad at them, right? So they would let terms of use violations slide more with Republicans and Democrats, ironically, because of all the furor and outrage over the issue. Yeah, there's a huge amount of topics we can talk about here with free speech versus giving cover to Nazis. Are words harm? Like, that's a big topic right now. Like, you're harming people. You're not creating a safe space. And harm used to mean, like, physically harming somebody mostly, or getting them fired or something. And now, if you just say words that disagree with people, like, you're harming them. And so, on the right, they've got, sometimes people will just deliberately say provocative things just to make a point on free speech, and then they get banned, for violating terms of service, and then they say, well, you're censoring my viewpoint, whereas really they were just being jerks about it. So this is a huge, huge debate. Okay, drilling for oil, right? It brings up, memories of, like, Deepwater Horizon drilling and like oil spills and things like that. Nobody wants it. We actually, like, California has huge oil deposits off our coast, and we don't drill them, basically, because we've had a ban on offshore oil drilling since it's like the 80s or something like that. Republicans are talking about energy independence, right? And so, same issue, right? Same issue. You're putting a drill down and getting oil out. The one frame evokes images of seagulls covered in tar and oil and stuff, and the other one is us being energy independent from Saudi Arabia or whatever. We're not beholden to any other country. Two different ways, same issue. Two different ways of looking at the same issue. Public service means, you're serving in government. Big government, don't serve in government. Stopping misinformation. Yeah, this is a big one too, right? Like the whole fake news thing. The fake news, the term fake news is mostly associated with Donald Trump these days, right? Like, so Donald Trump would say, that's fake news, that's fake news. And so the term fake news is associated with Donald Trump saying, CNN is lying about me, basically. I'm out of focus now. Fake news was actually invented by Hillary after the 2016 election. There was, like, about a month of, like, soul searching the Democrats had as to why Trump would win, because all the polls showed him losing, right? And so Hillary blamed fake news, which meant, like, misinformation on Facebook and things like that, where people were running fake news stories. And so there's a big talk about, like, stopping misinformation, like having Facebook censor certain, news stories that are fake. But that, of course, turns into a big question of, like, how do you determine what is fake? You've got to have some person who has, an omniscient view of, like, society and knowing what's true and what's false. Where did coronavirus come from? That person knows, and I'm pretty sure that person doesn't exist, because, like, I don't think anybody knows exactly where the coronavirus comes from. Like, it originated in Wuhan, but, there's all these people like, oh, it's a lab leak, and then people looked at the data and say, it can't be a lab leak, it came from the wet market there. Like, where it actually came from, like, what animal, like, literally nobody knows, as far as I know. And so, how is this person at Facebook and Twitter and Reddit or whatever, how are they going to be like, that's wrong? That's misinformation? Because I don't think anybody actually knows, right? And so the you might say, well, there's obviously some things that everybody knows is false, like the Earth's not flat or whatever, right? Which is, it's not. The Earth is kind of roundish, right? It's kind of like a sphere mostly. It's an oblate spheroid. Um, but like, okay, sure. So you like what delete Facebook posts that are saying the Earth is flat? Okay. Um, in Russia right now, Russia actually did pass laws criminalizing fake news, right? And they're going after journalists, right? So, war censorship laws are the 15 years imprisonment if you speak out against the Ukrainian conflict, right? And so, yeah, they're under there. That's a law against misinformation. And then, on the other side, you have like that's censorship. It should not be allowed. So it's two different views, same topic. Gun safety. This is one that I heard actually. Was about 8 months ago, and I was listening to like NPR, and NPR was talking about gun safety. I'm like, who's against gun safety? Because they were talking and they were saying like Republicans are against gun safety, and I'm like, that's weird, because I don't know any like Republican gun nuts, you might call them, gun fans, whatever you want to call them, gun fanatics, people that love guns. I don't know a single gun fanatic that's like against gun safety. You know what I mean? Like they're like, let's just shoot through drywall at our friends. Like I don't know any, you know what I mean? I'm like, what are they talking about? They're talking about gun safety. Like they're saying like Republicans are against gun safety. I'm like, that's a weird term. And then what I figured out they were talking about was gun control. So I was like, oh, I'm watching a new frame be born right now as we speak. I was like, wow, gun safety, right? Because the term gun control is like not very popular, right? If you ask Americans, like, do you support gun control? Like it's not an especially popular term. Gun rights, yeah, a lot of people on the right support gun rights. Not a lot of them support gun control, but everybody supports gun safety, right? If you're on the left, it means like taking guns away from people, right? Broadly speaking. And on the right, gun safety means you clean your gun and maintain it and don't put it away safely so kids can't get into it and shoot themselves and things like that. Everyone's for gun safety, and I'm like, oh, that's a brilliant frame. The only trouble is like it means something already. Like gun safety already has an established meaning, and so if you try rebranding gun control as gun safety, you're going to confuse the hell out of people. So we'll see how that plays out over the next couple of years, see if it takes off. Racism is another word that means something very different between the left and the right. So the right typically means racism is when you don't give people equal opportunities, right? Like, for example, if Harvard didn't allow black people to apply, that would be racist, right? To the left, it's equal outcomes, broadly speaking. And so what that means is that Harvard should admit as many black people as there are proportionally in America. And so that means that, and there's a lawsuit in front of the Supreme Court right now. They're ruling on it right now. We'll see if it gets overturned. Right now, Harvard engages in racial, I can't even think of a neutral way of saying this, racial discrimination or racial favoritism or affirmative action, however you want to put it. Where basically they will sort of fudge the dice for people with different skin colors and say, all right, if you have dark skin, you're more likely to get in. If you have lighter skin, you're less likely to get in, and that includes Asian people. And so Asian people are getting, like, statistically speaking, they're discriminated against. And so to the left, that's good because Asians are doing too well. And at Harvard and Ivy League schools and, UCs, for example. And so to the right, that's racism, right? If you don't allow an Asian person into Harvard because of their race, that's racism according to the right. According to the left, that is justice, right? Where you're making sure that each of the different groups of people get proportional representation at Harvard. So this is one of the reasons why the racism debate is so toxic in America, because when people say racist, they mean two very different things. Are you talking about equality of opportunity, or are you talking about equality of outcome, which is another word is equity? So if you hear people talking about equity, what that means is ensuring that there's equal outcomes for people of different skin colors. Whereas on the right, they would say that is racist. You know, if you pass somebody in a class because they have dark skin, that's racist. And on the left, they say, well, look, if your school is flunking more black people than white people, that's racist. You know, and there's probably an argument to be made for that too. Like, why is your school harder on black people? Like, what's going on there? You know, so there's actually good arguments, you know, to be made on both sides. I'm not actually putting on my professor hat here. Like, you know, if like two equally qualified people come in, one white, one black, and let's not forget Hispanics and Native Americans and everything else. We'll just say white and black. That's the traditional dichotomy, which bugs me. But okay. One white, one black, equal academic standing, equal grades, and the black people don't do as well. Like, I think the left has a point there, saying like, there's something wrong with your school. You know, like your school is like doing something to cause the black people not to succeed. And on the right, they would say, yeah, but if like California has like a law, I think it's maybe been overturned, where like you have to have a certain number of women on your board of directors. You have to hire women, you know, and they would say that's sexist, right? If you're hiring somebody because of their sex or not hiring somebody because of their sex, that's sexism, you know. And this is a very deep, very passionate debate that the left and the right both have, mostly with themselves, because they almost can't talk to each other because it just becomes instantly boiling hot. You know, like, you're a racist. No, you're a racist. You know, and then, you know, it's like almost impossible for the left and the right to even talk about racism, honestly. And it's a shame too, because I think there's again, I'm not like splitting the difference here because, you know, I'm a critical thinking professor and I don't, you know, impose my views on people. I actually do think that there's actually probably something to both cases there. Like, if your school is flunking twice as many black people, why? You know, like, you should probably look at that, you know. And at the same time, like, if you're just like admitting somebody because they're black, like there's something that feels inherently unjust about that as well, right? You know, you tell a student, sorry, you can't come to this college because of your race. You know, like, that's kind of screwed up because they can't do anything about it, right? It's not like, you know, your race is an immutable characteristic. You can't not be your race anymore. And so you're just hosed, right? And there's a lot of injustice on that side as well. So it's not an easy issue. And like I said, this issue is currently, for college admissions in particular, is up in front of the Supreme Court right now. So maybe even by the end of the semester, we'll see if this debate changes at all. Okay, don't say gay. So in Florida, they had a don't say gay bill. The actual name of it was parental rights in education, but this is what everybody knows it is. Why? Because it's a frame. The media came up with this thing. It rhymes, don't say gay, right? It rhymes, and so everybody knows it as that name. And so if you ask somebody like, hey, what does the don't say gay bill mandate? People would say, well, it means you can't say the word gay in the classroom, and it doesn't. Like, it's just a fantastic job of branding, right? Of framing the issue, right? What it actually does is prohibit discussions of sexuality for people under third grade. Indigenous Peoples Day, Columbus Day, right? Pretty obvious. Columbus Day is October, whatever, 17th. I don't know. And so there's been movement to rebrand it as Indigenous Peoples Day to, you know, obviously shift the hero worship of Columbus to not Columbus, right? Is the current thing. Like San Francisco calls it Indigenous Peoples Day, for example. And then this is something I heard recently also, like last semester. Like, they don't like calling homeless people homeless anymore. They like calling them unhoused, because even though unhoused means homeless, somehow that's not derogatory, and that's derogatory. I don't know. So it's it's one of those things too, because these terms, like, it's like, okay, you make a new term that's not derogatory, but it means the same thing, and then after people start using it, it becomes derogatory again, right? and then they make a new term, and then everybody shifts to that, and then it becomes derogatory because like words like idiot, moron. The word retard was originally a scientific term for somebody who was retarded. Retarded meaning moving slower, growing slower academically than their peers. Sorry. And so, like a student who was retarded, it didn't mean like somebody with Down syndrome and things like that, which it came to mean. It originally just meant their growth curve was slower than their peers, and it was supposed to be a scientific and neutral term. And now you can get fired if you call somebody that, right? And so what happens is that people invent a new neutral term, and then the neutral term becomes highly charged and highly negative, and then you can't use it anymore, and they make a new term, And so something like idiot, which now like idiot was actually a technical term, right? Like um, idiot versus moron, like all of these words are words that they're all negative, right? Like it means somebody that's stupid. Like it's never going to be a positive word. And so, but these were like actually like scientific terms, right? So like idiots, imbeciles, morons, like they're actually scientific terms, um, and then the terms were used until people decided they were demeaning and condescending. Like, yes, of course they are, like, and so like and then they use other terms, and then those become. It's like, what are you gonna do? I don't know. So it's mostly just important for you to pay attention to the terminology people are using, because people will get mad at you if you use the wrong ones. So you always have to like pay attention to like the words that other people are using. Even if you choose to use the old words, just at least be aware of it, so you're doing so deliberately and not accidentally. So yeah, new frames pop up all the time. We'll see, like gun safety. It's most recent one. We'll see how that one does. It's like watching a horse race, Okay, and it's off. Let's see if the frame succeeds or not. All right, and there's many more terms. Like when you go to Congress, the Republicans, at least, I don't know if the Democrats do, but the Republicans, you have like an orientation when you go to Congress as a representative. You get like a week of training, and one of the things they do is they hand you a book, and they're like, "Here's a list of all the terms. Never refer to single payer healthcare as single payer healthcare. Call it socialist healthcare. Never call it pro-choice. Call it pro-life. If you call it pro-choice, then and you're pro-life, then you're going to call yourself anti-choice, and that sounds really, really bad. So don't do it. And they actually sit down, they hammer the terms into you. Like, you must say this is a matter of energy independence, not drilling for oil. Don't use the word drilling for oil; it plays badly, right? And so you're actually given like terminology that you have to learn and use, and that's one of the things that makes watching political news so amusing to me. Is like you'll watch politicians go on, and they'll literally use a different set of phrases and a different set of arguments and a different set of catchphrases and things like that, and terminology than the other one. And it just is highly amusing to me. So yeah, and there's things all over the political spectrum too, right? So what you're doing when you use a term like that, like if you think of Elon as a tortured genius or something, then you've created a very simple metaphor or something like that you're going to view Elon's tweets through. It's like a lens that you're looking through. Okay. And so if you think of the abortion issue in terms of pro-choice, that's the lens you're looking at it through. Is it good to take away the rights of women to control their own body? Right? That's the question. Whereas if you use this phrase, is it okay to kill babies? Right? It's a different lens, and they're pointing in different directions very much. So yeah, nobody could be against choice. Nobody could be for Nazis. Who's against life? Who's against free speech? Like, nobody, right? That's a sign of a good frame is one where like nobody can argue against it. If they accept your frame, they have to agree with you. Like, nobody's like pro-death. There's no like pro-death like lobby in America. Yeah, I'm not aware of any, at least. There's no anti-choice lobby. It's just like I've heard news reporters before saying anti-choice protesters are in front of the Supreme Court today, and I'm like, okay, well, if you're calling them anti-choice protesters when they call themselves pro-life, we know that you're left wing, right? Like, it's just like by looking at the phrasing and terminology that people use, you can tell if they're left wing or right wing. It's actually a great litmus test to see where they lie on the political spectrum. And of course, there are more positions than just left wing and right wing as well. Like it's a very gross simplification of a very diverse set of views on America. But okay. And so whichever frame you adopt is going to affect your reasoning on the matter, right? So it's very useful in politics. It's very useful in public relations. So for those of you that have been following what's been going on with Activision Blizzard, they had a series of very high-profile sexual harassment issues there, and so this this PR piece came out, I think, last semester, maybe the semester before, and I saved it because I was just like, this is just a masterwork in framing, right? It's just a masterwork in public relations, and so I'm going to read it to you, and I hope you will find it amusing. And for your quiz, I'm going to ask you to point out which frames they tried establishing for Blizzard here. Okay, Activision Blizzard has made a number of important improvements, including significant changes to personnel, exiting a number of employees, and expanding compliance resources. In addition, the company has refreshed its HR. Isn't that nice? Refreshing doesn't mean they're firing people and hiring new ones. It's like drinking a Coke. It's refreshing. It's just so nice. They refreshed their HR organization. And this week, we'll welcome a new Chief People Officer, Julie Hodges, who joins the company from the Walt Disney Company. What a nice company Walt Disney Company is. The company also has expanded training, performance management, and anti-harassment resources. That's good. That's good. Cool. The company remains committed. It's not starting and committing. It's not starting commitment. It's remaining committed to ensuring it is the most welcoming, the most inclusive game company. So it's not like they're going to become inclusive or welcoming. They've been so all along. That's really what they're trying to say here. They've been welcoming and including, but they're going to remain committed to it and ensuring that their welcomeness and inclusiveness continues despite whatever it was that happened before. We're not even talking about here. Like, they don't even mention any of the actual problems here, right? And connecting and engaging its 400 million players through Epic Entertainment. Isn't that nice? Like, they throw in a little advertisement there, like, Epic Entertainment. Like, we don't make boring entertainment. Here at Blizzard, we make Overwatch 2 and Diablo, Immortal. Epic Entertainment. Created by the very best people in the industry. So, your quiz will be on some of the interesting word choices they picked here in this statement. Because I watched this and almost died laughing. I was like, that is a masterpiece of PR work right there. Not one, mention or acknowledgement of any problems that they've done at all. Any of the actual allegations and lawsuits and fines. None of that. Instead, they're just talking about things like Walt Disney Company, Epic Entertainment, and we're expanding. It's not like we're starting them; we're expanding them. We already had them, but we're making them even better now. And we're going to remain committed to being the most welcoming and inclusive company. That's what we're doing. We're not changing anything. We're not, because we were good already. We're good already. It's just we were so good. We can't even get better. We're just going to remain good. That's all we can do. And hire a chief people officer, whatever that is. All right, so here's some more frames. Left wing, I want you to punch Nazis. On the right, everyone I don't like is Hitler. This is obviously a view of the right towards people writing on the left. On the left, people that are opposed to them are Nazis. Positive view of Antifa. You got the slingshot here. It's like David and Goliath is the metaphor going on here. On the right here, you have a right wing. These are all taken from my friends' news feeds, and I think one of my friends might even recognize it. If he's watching this. So all my heroes kill cops, right? It's a fairly negative viewpoint, at least for the right. At least it's a fairly negative portrayal of Antifa. Here, you've got this person. I'm going to Berkeley to scalp, Nazis, and And then on the right, white men are terrorists. So you have a left wing meme, a right wing meme. It's yeah, and you can watch these videos on your own. They're quite interesting, right? Like Nixon shot himself in the foot when he said, "Everybody wants to know, is your president a crook?" Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm not a crook. So what he did was he created a frame in which the debate is Nixon a crook or not, and now everyone's talking about him as a crook. Bad idea. Reagan, on the other hand, when he was asked, "Are you too old to run for president?" Said, "I'm not going to hold my opponent's youth and inexperience against him," which was a fantastic reversal of that, right? He tells communism jokes, Clinton on welfare reform, portraying the issues like welfare queens and things like that. They're well worth like watching and just seeing what phrases they use. The three of these are all good. Nixon used frames very badly and cost him his presidency, arguably. Yeah. So basically, the downside to a frame is that they're like very narrow ways of looking at the world, and you have to discard them if you're going to be a critical thinker. So you have to like be aware of it first of all. If all you watch is like Fox News, then you've probably got a certain frame. If all you watch is CNN, you've probably got the opposite frame. And at a bare minimum, take both of those lenses and put them together into a pair of glasses and watch two different sources of media at a minimum. A friend of mine shared called Ground News, I think it's called. And so this place here, they will show you what the bias is on different stories, like who's covering this story, right? More Democrats, more Republicans, and so that's actually really nice. And so this is maybe a good site that you might want to. Jim Jordan there. New York Post leans right, mixed factuality. One American Network, right wing, mixed factuality. Trinity Politics News, right. Let's see, high factuality from the Hill, center bias. So it'll tag things with like the bias distribution on things like that, and it's good. Like nothing's perfect, but like I would maybe recommend you guys check that out, because in order to be able to see outside of the periscope you're looking at the world through, you need other sources of vision, other media intakes, other people you talk to. Like one of my favorite things with my friend group is that I've got people that are libertarians, I got people that are communists, I got people from every single political alignment and spectrum and belief system out there, from atheists to Christian, fundamentalist Christians to Muslims and Jews, everything in between, right? And so when you just sit around and you can have a good conversation, then you end up getting to hear people's stories that you never heard before, and that's a way of being able to like see outside of your frame. And so Zen Buddhism is kind of the whole point of it is basically to try and figure out what your own preconceived notions are and your own preconceived biases, and trying to perceive the world as it is without those frames sort of interfering with it. And so the way they do so is to present these things called koans. And so people tend to think of them as like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And that's really not what they're about. What they're about is they're not riddles that have an answer. They're stories that usually reveal some sort of preconceived notion that you have, right? So like the one I talked about a while back was when you see the Buddha kill the Buddha, and your immediate reaction from that as a Zen Buddhist would be like what? Why should we kill the Buddha? Like, what? Aren't we Buddhists? And that reaction of like, what? That can't be true. That's exactly what the koans are designed to elicit. And then you can look at it and be like, wait a second, like why, what's going on here? And then you can have a conversation about what that thing actually means, right? Like, to a Buddhist friend of mine, it means any statue you see is not actually the Buddha, it's just a statue. And so, mentally shatter it, that's not actually the Buddha you're looking at. That was his take on it, And in the book that I have, where I got that from, it's different library. they said it's a matter of striking. The Buddha that you can see is not the real Buddha, and strike it down and free yourself from preconceived notions and things like that. So, and then I've had other people give other interpretations of that as well. It's quite interesting. Yeah, and then we're basically out of time. But one frame just from my own personal experience, I worked with a group that supported men victims of domestic violence, and the most people aren't aware that men are victims of domestic violence too. It's almost always portrayed as a woman. In fact, a lot of the laws just assume that the victim of a domestic violence case is the woman, and the violator is the man, which again ignores that there's homosexual couples and stuff like that. And so I worked with a charity that was trying to help men who are victims of domestic violence. And the thing is, there's very few shelters that actually will help men. If you look at shelter space, you've got 150,000 beds for women, 135,000 for children, 161,000 for pets, and 1,000 for men. And that's the result of the frame and action. And it's not people joke about it, right? If you look at this Yelp review here, a guy was trying to find a shelter space for one of his friends was being abused by his wife, and he said, "Is there such a thing? Any help would be appreciated. Thanks." And then all of the comments are mocking him. What's good for the geese is good for the gander. Oh Sheila, oh Sheila. There's nothing sadder than a man that's scared of his wife. It's about your fat wife again, Dave. Go to a friend's house and crash there. Meanwhile, call the cops or something. Geez, we're basically done here, girl. So, if you go through all these responses here, you can see, people react in disbelief when their frame is challenged. That can't possibly have happened, and that's a big downside to it. So, we'll stop here for today. And I think we have Friday off, so I don't know if we have Monday off. So I'll have to check on that. So I'll see you guys next week. All right, peace.